Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the On Their Way Up podcast. This is a podcast about up and coming entertainers. And today I'm joined by a very special guest. He just moved to New York from the Pacific Northwest. And for the past couple of years, he's been traveling all around the country, working in some amazing clubs and with some incredible comedians such as Nate Bargatze and the late uh, Norm MacDonald. You can also see his special, the Crowdwork album, on Tubi, or listen to his podcast, The Jake Silberman Show. Thanks for being on the podcast, Jake Silberman.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. You said you just moved to New York like a week ago.
Yeah, man. I've been here. I live in Astoria in Queens. Yeah, I got here like a week ago Monday. So I've been here just coming up on 2 weeks. And yeah, it's crazy. I was supposed to move here actually pre pandemic. I was supposed to get out here in June of 2020. And then obviously that all fell apart. So I've been kind of biding my time and waiting for it to kind of line up, and it finally did. So yeah, I pulled the trigger and I'm out here now.
That's awesome. How's the move been?
It's fine. I mean, there's like moving is sucks, but I didn't move out here with much, so I just had to like kind of make it all happen from scratch. But it's been good. It's a crazy scene. There's just a ton of comics, and some of the best comics in the world are here. So it's kind of strange to be like a small fish in the biggest pond possible. But it's good. It's the right next move. So I'm excited to do it.
That's awesome because you came out of like the Portland area
Yeah, I was
originally.
a Portland comic for 9 years, and yeah, that was good. It's a good scene out there, but yeah, it's small and it's got a ceiling, so you got to go somewhere else at some point.
Well, especially after like 9 years.
Yeah,
I see some people who've been doing it for a year and a half who'll move out to like New York or LA, and it's like, why don't
yeah.
you like not take over, but just like get to the top echelon of comics in like your local scene, and then when you make the jump, it'll be easier.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely, it's nice. I have some connections out here. I mean, at some point, though, you do end up having to kind of start over. But at least, yeah, I guess I'm starting over with 9 years of skill rather than like a year. So I kind of have an understanding more about what to do and how it's all kind of works out, I guess.
Do you think there is something to moving out to a city like that when you're really new to it, and like being able to come up in a scene like that?
Yeah, I think in New York you could do it. I mean, there's so many open mics here that you could just do those all night every night, and I don't yeah, I don't think it would be impossible for sure. I mean, you would basically just not know anybody. You would just know the open mic scene. But I think you could do it. I think LA, it seems like I've heard it's would be harder to do that.
Oh yeah.
But New York, like I go to these open mics just to kind of practice the new stuff or whatever. And I see clearly like a bunch of people who just started here and they're like younger and they're just like, this is their first scene. So yeah, I think you could definitely do it.
That's gotta be so crazy. Your first scene is New York.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be tough. I mean, especially like, I don't know, depending how old you are and like the city itself is just so expensive that you would, you would have to have some type of money coming in to like even live here to make that happen. So yeah, it's I mean, it's tough in comedy, but it's also just it takes a lot out of you. You're always like walking around and the subway is full and it's just like a lot of energy that it like kind of takes out of you. So you got to be like ready for that.
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
'Cause did you start in Portland 9 years ago? Are you from that area originally?
No, I'm from Minneapolis. I did about like a month of comedy in Minneapolis where I'm from, and then I ended up moving out to Portland, kind of unrelated to comedy, and just kept doing it there. So I guess technically I am a Minneapolis comic, but I don't really claim it because it was such a short amount of time doing it out there. And Portland is really where like I developed. So yeah, Portland I always consider like my home scene. But yeah, and it's good. But it was time to move, and it was probably time to move 2 years ago. But obviously, shit hit the fan. So
I mean, I don't really know what event you're talking about, but yeah, I mean, stuff happens in people's lives, and
yeah, I don't know if you were quite of memory forming age back then, but yeah, just it was the bad times. So
well, yeah, like a month in a scene, like that doesn't count. Like your first month
no,
of stand up really doesn't even count.
shit, your first few years of stand up don't really count. I mean, they count in terms of like you have to do them, but you're so bad that it's just like whatever. So I don't know, but it's like I feel like every year, if you can't look back and kind of go, like if you watch like a tape or listen to a set from like a year ago, and if you're not like kind of grossed out by it, I don't know if you're making the progress you should make. I just feel like you should be kind of disgusted with your former work. Like you're just like, yeah, that's not good. I mean, shit, dude, it's hard for me to listen to tapes from 2 days ago because I'm like, oh God, I don't know. I feel like you should hate almost everything you do. Like you have to do it because that's what you have at the moment. But I feel like you should kind of hate almost everything you've done because I don't know. Those people who really like their own stuff, I always get suspicious of it. It's just weird to me.
Well, like that's the only way you get better though is by being like uber critical.
Right.
Is like you have to go through it like you hate it because oftentimes you do, and then that makes you just get better by being super like critical about it.
Yeah, you have to be like smart critical because like I think in the early years I was like critical to the point of like almost like just being depressed that I was doing comedy because it was just like, oh, I hate everything I'm doing. So you have to like it enough to keep doing it, but also then and I guess the criticism has to be like warranted and sharp. Like if a joke is getting you really good response, you can't say that's a bad joke. Like you have to be honest and be like, all right, so this works. What could I change to make it even better? But like I used to just be like everything I do sucks. And so then you're like, well, you're not actually really doing anything. You're not like helping your own cause. You're just being like a depressed loser. So
Well, yeah, and where do you go from there? Like if you're going like, okay, this bit is weak in this spot, or like this premise isn't connecting, then you can work on that. But like if you just
yeah,
go like, I suck, my material sucks, everything
right.
sucks, like there's no path upwards.
No, and you just get in this like funk and like spiral. So you can't do that. So you have to be positive enough about yourself and be honest. It's really just about honesty. You have to be honest. Like this works, this doesn't, and you kind of have to like remove yourself from it and be like just watching it from like a third person, like objective eye of like, okay, this is what needs to change.
Yeah, that's another big thing is like comics who can't separate. You shouldn't like totally separate yourself from the material, but you kind of have to when you're looking at it because if you put yourself into it too much, then it's not I don't like this joke, it's I don't like myself, and that's
Yeah.
a way worse like, critical path to take.
Yeah, you're just gonna kill yourself. You're gonna hate doing anything then. So you really have to be very removed and just like as an audience member, would I be laughing at this or why wasn't I laughing at this point versus yeah, like I hate this joke or I hate why am I doing this joke, cuz but I was like that for a while. I feel like I really dragged myself down for a while like that just being too weird about the stuff and eventually you just grow enough that you're like okay like just be a big boy and like look at this from a like a real sense.
Be a man,
You got to be a man, dude. You
be
got
a
to grow
comedy
up.
man.
Yeah, you have to.
Do you see like the growth because you've been doing it for you said like 9 or 10 years, like do you see the growth tapering off like the further you get into stand up, like the growth between year 2 and 3 is bigger than the growth between year 7 and 8?
I mean, it's definitely more of like a refinement period the longer you go. Like, the first couple years, it's if you're doing it regularly, you'll make big progress just because you start at such a low bar. Like my first couple years, like I was just having trouble still like making eye contact with people, and like I was just so nervous still, and like so unsure of what I was doing. And now it's like I've been in so many different situations and different, I've done huge shows, I've done tiny shows, I've done really good shows, I've done really bad shows, I've done shows in all parts of the country and for all
Wait,
different types of people.
you've done really bad shows?
Yeah, well, I have. It's crazy to think of a superstar like comedy like me doing really bad shows, but
Yeah, there's no hope
yeah.
for any of us at this point.
Yeah, dude, it's tough. It's tough when even a guy like myself has to do the really bad ones. But you just kind of like you understand what it is more fully. And so but that's like when like you know like like in do you I don't know if you've like follow sports or anything, but
Yeah, yeah.
like so like in basketball, you can see it more in basketball because of a rookie comes in and like their first couple years, it's like they might, if they're like a higher rookie, let's say, they'll average like 8 points and then 9, and then that like third year it's like, oh shit, all of a sudden they're averaging like 12.
Hmm.
Like they've like been in the league for a couple years, they're stronger, they understand it, they know their position better, like they've just like those. But then like some guys take that extra jump where it's like, okay, he went from like year 3 12 points to year 4 17 points, you know,
Hmm.
and that is a lot harder to do. Those extra few shots to make every is harder than going from I made 3 shots a game to 6 shots a game.
Yeah.
But 6 to like 9 shots are like making 10 or 12 shots a game. Like you're averaging 20, 24 points. Like that's in comedy, that's kind of what it is like you were so bad that you made 2 layups and then you made 4 layups. But going from 2 to 4 to like 8 or 12, that is like, that's like you're really moving your game up. And some comics can't get that, or some comics take a while to get that, or some comics, I mean, it's different for everybody. Some comics come in, they're like 2 years in, and it's just like, wow, they really know what they're doing. They're very comfortable on stage. So it's different for every person, but you have to be aware of the like. You always have to be aware of your weak spots. I think like if you're not really objectively aware, if you come to the league and you just got that one move and people haven't seen you before, it's like, all right, he always goes right, but we don't know that. But year 2, they're gonna be like, he just goes right, he can't go left. So you have
Yeah.
to be able to go left. You have to give the mid range. You have to hit the 3 point. You have to get the defense. Like it's all these little things that make up a complete player or a complete comic. And if you're just kind of like, I'm good at this and that's all I do, it's like you might get a by, like people, you probably could even have a career that way, but it's like, do you want to be really good or great, or you just want to be like okay? And I think the really guys who are really great, they have like, they know like, all right, this type of writing doesn't, I'm not good at that yet, or like I'm not good at crowd work, or I'm not good at riffing, or I always fall apart when someone yells at me, like whatever their weak spot is,
Hmm.
they'll attack it versus like shy away from it. And I think you just got to do that if you want to really really be one of the greats.
So that kind of like goes into my next question is you do a lot of crowd. I mean, you put out a crowd work special. You put
Hmm.
out crowd work clips all the time. When did you start developing that like knack for that?
It was pretty early. I remember the way I always describe is I remember having a very specific, like probably, I don't know, let's say it was a couple years in. It's got to be probably 2 or 3 years into comedy maybe, but like I just remember I had a pretty rough month of just everything I wrote was not working. I remember I just had this notebook and I was just trying jokes and just eating it every night. And eventually I think I just was like, dude, like I basically like kind of threw my hands up in the air. I was like, you would be almost better off going on stage with nothing than trying to keep writing whatever you're writing right now. Like it's just not working for you. So I did that. I just did kind of like a month basically, I think, of like riffing, and then eventually you're talking to the crowd. Like I just kind of was like, just go up there unprepared and just see what happens, because like I was just it was just not fun bombing that much. It was just like it was frustrating. It was like annoying. I wasn't having a good time. And then when you're not having a good time and you're bombing, you're just like, well, why am I even doing this? So I kind of just, it was more just out of desperation. I was like, just try something new. And I remember just kind of having like a pretty quick ability to talk to people in the moment. And I was like, all right, so this is something. And then I just kind of, developed it, just I did it more and more during sets. And then yeah, like I just kind of became like good enough at it that I was like, I think I could do an album. Like I think I could just do like an hour of crowd work basically. And I just had a goal of that. And I was like, I'm gonna do it. And so like I just picked, you know, I recorded it 3 weeks before the pandemic. I recorded February
Wow.
22nd of 2020, and it was a very lucky, time wise. If I had waited an extra month, I wouldn't have got to do it. So, um, yeah, I just was like, I'm gonna do this. Like it's just a goal, just like a check this off the list kind of thing. And so yeah, we put the album together and ended up like Helium Comedy Records picked it up for their label, so it's out there as like an actual album. And then
Nice.
I put it on YouTube, and then this production company took it and they put it on Tubi or whatever. But yeah, so it's like it was just a thing that like slowly developed. And it's weird because like now in New York, like I haven't been doing a lot of crowd work, because I don't get a lot of stage time here because I'm new. But
Hmm.
I don't know, it's like I kind of going back to the weaknesses thing, I was like, I started to worry if I was like relying on it too much,
Hmm.
because I almost always could always have that in my back pocket. Like I would always be like, well, if this joke doesn't work, I can always go into the crowd, which is like good. It's like a good skill to have. And some nights, like the material just isn't working. The whole show, you could tell if you're watching the comics before you and like no one's really hitting, like, well, maybe it is time to like mix it up. Maybe the crowd wants something more lively or they want something more interactive. So it's good to have
Yeah.
that tool. But I kind of started feeling like, you put out an album that's all crowd work, like you wonder like, all right, do people just think I do this? Do they not think I write? So it's like I kind of started to like challenge myself to like stay in the pocket more and like write more, do more sets where it's just material. And then like I open for guys, like I just opened for Kyle Kinane on a run of
Nice.
shows. Like we did some shows in the Southeast together, and it's just like, when you're featuring, you're not necessarily really trying to do a ton of crowd work before the headliner. And that's kind of how I was brought up generally. I know that like people have different opinions. Some headliners don't care what you do, some headliners definitely don't want you to talk to the crowd. But we were doing some of these shows were pretty big theaters anyways, so it wasn't really able to do a lot of crowd work. So I
Right.
was just like trying to more rely on the act and rely on the jokes versus rely on, and again, it's like I said, like you just have to have all the tools. My favorite comics are can do it all. Like I think my favorite comic right now is Dave Attell, and if you've ever seen Dave Attell live, it's just like he's probably one of the best joke writers that exists. He's
Yep.
probably one of the quickest joke writers I've ever seen. But he does talk to people, and it's extremely funny, and he is able to riff and talk about what's in the room, or like, so he has all the tools. So it's like, and before he died, Patrice O'Neill was also a guy. I mean, Elephant in the Room is like probably one of the best specials of the last 10 or 20 years. And if you watch that special, Patrice O'Neill does crowd work on his special. Like he
Crazy.
talks and he goes hard on people and it works. But he was like willing to take those risks, where he's talking about people's relationships and all that stuff. And like, so I just want to be, I like look at those guys and like, those are the dudes I want to be like. They
Well, I
can
mean,
talk to the crowd, they can riff, they can write jokes, and all three are like master level. They're not fucking around on any of them.
yeah, I mean, like they're invincible. Like when you
Yeah.
have all of those different tools, like put Dave Attell in any situation
Right.
with a mic, and I can't imagine it going poorly. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, but I mean, I definitely get your point as to like, it's good to develop these different tools, but if you just only do one thing, crowds pick up on that, and other comics too, which, like, for me, doing well in front of the crowd is good, but like if the comics don't really respect your stuff, like they can kind of see through it a little more, and that might just be a personal thing. Like I've heard some
Yeah,
people just say like
that's
you shouldn't listen to the comics that much, and I think it definitely depends. Like I had a comic on a guy named Cameron Logston who used to do a lot of
oh,
impressions.
yeah, I know. I was just in Omaha, I did a show with him.
Oh hell yeah, dude!
Yeah, he's a good dude.
Cameron's the best. He came down and did my show in Lawrence, Kansas, and we hung out.
Nice.
He pretty much was like a along with a lot of those guys. He definitely mentored me since I started in Omaha.
Yeah,
But he said that when he first started, he liked doing impressions, and he did some impressions, and then comics were like, "Oh, there's the impression guy over there," and he like
right.
cut it out. And so I think it definitely is like wanting respect from the comics that you respect, but also filtering out like the bullshit or like, okay, maybe I shouldn't listen to what this person has to say.
Yeah, I think that's a very like listening to comics or peers could be a very double-edged sword because on one hand it's like it is a community and you do need their respect because they also are the bookers, like they
Hmm.
also book you. So, you need that, but also at the end of the day like the most important thing is making the audience laugh.
Hmm.
And comics are also very jaded and hate themselves. So like also sometimes it's like unfunny comics are trying to like judge people and it's like, well, you shouldn't be judging anybody because you're not good at comedy. So I don't know why you're talking about anybody else but yourself. So there's like obviously that, but that's a pretty obvious one. Is like if an unfunny guy doesn't like you, it's like, well, who the fuck cares, dude? Like you don't know what funny is anyways.
Right.
But there is that thing. I mean, but like there's a million and one hacks out there who have a perfectly fine career and comics don't really respect them, but they work. I mean,
Yeah,
I know guys all across the country who are I would view them as pretty hacky. It's pretty basic, uninteresting comedy, but they work in clubs all the time and they're making money. So it's like, I don't know, it kind of depends on what you want out of it too,
that's
you
true.
know.
That's very true. It is, and the comedy community is like can be so awful. Like it can be so
Yeah.
amazing and so terrible.
Yeah, I mean, some of these people are fucking psychos, dude. Like, and they shouldn't even be in any type of like public thing, but because comedy's so by its own nature accepting, because it's anybody can sign up for an open mic. It's just yeah, it draws all these psychos. But like, I've met a lot of great people, and I met a lot of just real shitty people, and you obviously get better and you get more protective of who you're actually going to hang out with as you grow older. You don't need to hang out with everybody. So but yeah, I don't know, I would just say like the obviously the number one thing is, are you funny to an audience? And after that you can decide if it's sometimes too. I see comics, like I'll go to these open mics, and I mean, just because I've been doing it for a longer time than a lot of them, like
Hmm.
their jokes aren't working that well, so they'll say something that only works in a room full of comedians. They'll be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
this is fucking stupid, right?" And like they'll get a big laugh, and I'm like, "But that is a false reward. That's like a fake treat. Like you're
Oh,
not. This would not work in a real room. Like if you ever went to a bar and you were bombing, and then you'd made some aside, they would be like, "What are you talking about?"
yeah.
So that is a bad habit that comics do where they're like just making their friends laugh. So then it's like they're going only for the respect of their peers and not for the respect of the room. And that's a terrible habit to have.
I mean, I'll combine like the last three things we're talking about. I was talking with a comic who was getting advice, big air quotes for people who are only listening, from a comic who only gets like laughter ironically.
Yeah.
And so it was like, not only does this guy not get how he's getting the laughs, but then he was trying to give other people advice about like how they should do it. You
Right.
see that often, but then you also see like some incredible people. Have you over the past decade seen like not comedy as like the on stage shit, but like the camaraderie between comics or like that kind of thing? Have you seen that change a lot over the past decade, you think?
I mean, it's the whole I mean, obviously, comedy in some way is very simple, and it's just one person on the stage with a microphone trying to make a room full of strangers laugh. So that's like kind of hasn't really changed. But I mean, the entire like game of comedy, like marketing, has changed, and I think within that, um, I don't know about camaraderie, but like the relationships between comedians has changed. I mean, the whole like podcast thing is like now it's just like if you just have a crew of people with their own popular podcasts, like you see it all the time.
Hmm.
They always have their homies on, and so it's like, oh, like this guy is the host of this podcast, so we have him on ours, and then he has us on his, and
Hmm.
it just builds this like cross network of fans where it's like, oh, I'm a fan of Spencer, but Spencer had Jake on. Now I'm a fan of Jake. Now Jake has Spencer on his, and Spencer also had Dave on his. Like it's just this like so
Yeah.
that whole thing is like now it's just like if you're and you can see it like you can see these like kind of like comedy crews who all help each other out, and Rogan was kind of like the first of this modern era where Rogan like just by Rogan having hit you on his podcast, all of a sudden it was like, oh, now Ari Shafir is getting known. Now Tom Segura is getting known. Now Burt Kreischer is
Right.
getting known. And then those guys have their own now. Now Tom can have some people on his, and like so that whole thing is pretty new, I would imagine, because of just media and how accessible media is. And if one guy in your camp, like Shane Gillis blew up, but Shane Gillis has a bunch of friends from Philly that he's like, he does a podcast with one of them. He's helped out other Philly guys who now have their own successful podcast. So it's like,
Hmm.
if you're in the orbit even of someone who's successful, like your shit will rise too. And I don't know if, I mean, I'm sure that always was the case in some way where like one friend blows up and they bring a few people along, but now it just seems so much more visible. And like, if you get one big comedian to share one of your clips, like that could change you overnight. Like if some comic, with a million followers is like, oh, this dude's funny, like I would, I mean, like you could just be like, oh, now I'm in this new level. So
Yeah.
that has changed. And I think you know, comics realize that pretty quickly. Like you can just tell how people position themselves. They're like, oh, this guy's like kind of rolling with this crew because he wants to be in that thing, or he thinks his comedy fits with this fan base.
Hmm.
And so I guess that would be the way I look at it now. And before, without, I mean, when I started in 2013.
Wow.
I mean, everything has changed since then, and I feel like I'm in this weird crew of comics who are like we were kind of too late. We were this like bridge generation because like when I started, like we really just had Facebook. Instagram wasn't, I don't even know if Instagram was a thing in 2013, but if it was, no comics really like needed it. Like no comic was like looking at it as like a necessary tool. And
Right.
I didn't even have like I had an Instagram for like a year back in like 2015 or 2016, and then I deleted it, and I didn't have one until 2019. Like I just got it like 3 years ago or whatever, which seems like insane to tell a comic now to be like, oh, I didn't really have Instagram for a while.
Right.
Well, like, and when I started, all the older comics were like, don't ever put any jokes online. Like, don't put your
Yeah.
jokes on YouTube because you're saving those for an album one day. And now it's like an album or a special. I mean, every fucking comic has an album or a special. Like, they're not even, I see a comic come out with a new thing every week. And it's just like, the material, just people are not holding on to material. Like, so I came from this, like, that's completely different now. Like comics will do a joke for literally 2 days and be like, all right, I'm going to put this online and get views. Like the joke only serves them to get views. Like the joke
Hmm.
isn't, it's not like a permanent thing for them. It's just like, all right, well, I did it and I'm going to fucking throw it online because really all I need is like an online following and then I'm good to go. Like, it's now everybody's just racing for the numbers. You just want like a bunch of people to follow you and then you can go and tour.
Yeah.
So it's weird. It's just a weird thing. Like it is like a straight up like generation gap. Like me and all my friends who started around the same time, like we were late to this game because we kind of came up being like, this is stupid. Like we were always like, this is so dumb that they're just doing this.
Hmm.
But albums don't really matter anymore. Albums like,
No.
I mean, when I first started comedy, like people would be like, "Have you heard of this album?" And it was like oh, like Nate Bargatze's like what is it, getting yelled at by a clown or whatever, or like David Tell's like Skank for the Memories. Like they were like
Mhm.
defining albums that was like they like kind of broke their career almost, you know. And
Right.
now it's like I don't who even listens to albums, you know. It's like all specials now. It's just it's a whole different game.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about with that I think has been interesting that you've been doing in your career is these like going on the street and talking to people videos.
Yeah.
And like those have been really really interesting to watch, and I mean hilarious too. Like definitely go check out Jake's YouTube page. You see, I mean, so much amazing content. But like, how did you get started? I mean, because explain to people like kind of the whole idea behind these videos.
Yeah, so I got started in these in Portland. I was part of like a kind of basically like a late night, you know, show, like a monthly late night show. We would do once a month at this improv theater, and you know, we would write, you know, like monologue, desk bits, all that, you know, kind of the same shit. But we one of the things that we were going to do was like a man on the street thing, which is like a pretty classic like late night bit.
Hmm.
And so they started off just as these pieces, just really for the show. We would just do the show and we would play it at the show. And then I would throw it on YouTube, but it was kind of an afterthought. But it was just like very Portland focused videos. Like, I think the first one we did was we interviewed people waiting in line for brunch because, like, it's kind of like an inside joke in Portland that, like, people are willing to spend like an hour in line at these brunch spots. Portland was like a big brunch town. And so it was that, and you know, we went to a beer festival, but it was always like very Portland specific for this show that we were making.
Hmm.
And then the pandemic hit, and me and the guy who was doing the camera work on it were like, well, like we liked making those videos, and like, you know, Portland was the center of a lot of like the BLM protests. So we were like, well, let's like go down and just do what we were doing, but like, you know, this is obviously very different, but we're going to go interview these protesters and go show what's happening downtown. So we made a few of those, and then like Portland in 2020 and 2021 just became this very weird like focus of the country. Like we had
Yeah.
the longest protest, you know, it was like even more than Minneapolis where George Floyd was killed. Like Portland had the longest running protest and some of the most active and crazy cop protest interactions and stuff. And then there was there was also like the right wing movements in Oregon. So the Proud Boys were really big. And like, so there was just like a lot of stuff that happened. And obviously comedy wasn't happening. So we just kept making these videos, and, um, you know, they became kind of their own thing. Like, you know, people liked it. I got like way more hits on those videos than I ever did on like stand up clips on my YouTube. Like those like
Yeah.
kind of hit a different thing. So yeah, we did like videos of the protests. We did a Proud Boy rally. We did what do we do? Like a straight pride rally. We did a anti-vax thing. We did a we went down to Salem, Oregon, and did a January 6th protest.
Man.
So we did a lot of these like very tense political videos. During basically when comedy really wasn't happening. And so they were a lot of fun. I mean, you know, they were kind of a mix of comedy and like journalism. Um, but it's kind of funny because like, you know, you can't do anything anymore on the internet because every like you can't do it and then just be yourself because like the most famous person always is going to get like the OG credit, you know. So like there was this
Hmm.
guy, it's called All Gas No Breaks. I'm sure you've seen them, or now they're called Channel 5. And so it was just like, oh, you're copying these dudes and, whatever. So, but that was never my main thing. I always just wanted to be a comedian, but we made them and they were fun. And I would like to make that part of my work still. It's a little, I don't really enjoy just going though on the street and making random videos. Like I like when there's like an event and I like when there's some like built in tension. I don't really want to go like now, man, on the street. I mean, I'm sure you see it all the time, like on TikTok and
Oh yeah.
Instagram. And it's just the worst shit. It's just these guys like going up to drunk girls and be like, "Oh, what's your body count? Like, oh, like how many dudes have you fucked?" And it's like so boring, but it's so easy to
Yeah.
make because all you need is a camera and a fucking microphone. So yeah, those were a lot of fun. I
What
got a
was
lot of yeah. I
what
mean,
was
it
the
was
sorry, what was the craziest one you ever did? Like place you went or event or like person you talked to?
well, I mean, the January 6th one was pretty crazy just because it was such a like a so January 6th obviously happened in Washington D.C. where they stormed the Capitol, but then like that same day they had all these like protests, stop the steal protests around the country. And
Mhm.
obviously they didn't know they were going to storm the Capitol, but like so they had all these like stop the steal, and so we went to the local one in Salem, and yeah, just seeing people. I mean, man, the power of fucking belief is a wild thing to watch because they were broadcasting at the Salem one, they were broadcasting the January 6th protests happening in DC, and they were showing these people break in, and these people in when we were interviewing them would not. They like this one lady's talking about how like real patriots would never do that. That's like Antifa, and it's like they couldn't believe that their group would do something like that. Like there had to
Interesting.
be there's always has to be another reason. It can't be them. It has to be some evil actor or whatever. So, just seeing people truly they're not lying. They are who they say they are. They really do believe this.
Right.
And just being around people of such conviction over and over again. I mean, a lot of the events we went to were right wing events, but yeah, like they really do believe they're not faking. And it's interesting. And I always tried to remove myself. Like I'm just there to like talk to people. I'm not really even there to judge. Like I obviously have my own opinions, but I would never. Uh, it's not as interesting to me just to be like, oh, you're dumb. Like it's just like it's
Right.
more interesting just like let them say wild shit and don't really interject that much. Just see like what they are going to bring to the table.
Oh yeah. I mean, it makes itself like you people who almost push too hard for it like ruin how great it could be by
Right.
just letting crazy people say crazy shit.
Exactly. And there are a lot of crazy people out there and they are all addicted to talking into a camera or microphone.
Yeah.
That's like their one bond is that they love to get their message out. So you can always talk to them.
And we're not going to bring up how meta it is that we are two idiots with microphones in front of a camera. So
I mean, we
say what you
we
will.
want it too, dude. We
Who were
want it
both
too.
who were both at January 6th. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I
a lot of
stormed. I was
similarities.
ready.
You were watching them and you were like, I don't know why you guys are so upset about this. This is awesome. Like, how are you guys not?
Yeah.
These guys are
It's
great.
fucking yeah, it rocked, dude.
Absolutely. Didn't one of them get picked up by your mom's house?
No, so there's a guy in Portland actually who does a lot of prank phone calls for some of the bigger podcasts. So I've done a few with him,
That's right.
and a few of them have been on your mom's house. But yeah, that's also on my YouTube channel. Just the video of that. But yeah, yeah. So I've done those, and those are a lot of fun. And that one, yeah, that one still gets views. I mean, years later, just because your mom's house is so popular.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
Uh, so I guess kind of I'm trying to see if I have any more questions. And if you have questions for me, like by all means. Oh, so you traveled all around the country. Like that
Yes.
was a really interesting. That's how we met. Is you were in Omaha doing this
Right.
whole cross country road trip.
Yep.
Uh, what was the impetus behind this? Because this is a really interesting watch as well. Funny, but also just kind of cool to watch.
Right. I met you in the summer of 2021 when I was in a van with a friend of mine. We were going from Portland to New York, watching or not watching, but like filming, kind of, in more or less the return of comedy after COVID, I guess. I mean, it was the
Hmm.
summer of 2021. Like, obviously, people have been kind of doing comedy, but like this was kind of that, like, that summer was like, right as like, because people had just been getting vaccinated that spring, you know,
Hmm.
and this was when we still also believed that the vaccine was like truly the end of COVID. So
Yeah.
everybody was like, once they got vaccinated at that point in time, people were like, well, I'm done. Like, whatever, if you don't want to get vaccinated, that's fine. But like, this was when they were saying you can never get COVID again. Like, it was just like,
Oh yeah.
this was like peak, like, we're all good now,
The world is healed. It's
the
over.
world is healed. And so people were going out to bars again and they were going out to live shows and like things were coming back in a real way. So yeah, we did a month in my van, doing comedy across the country, interviewing comics, interviewing people on the street. It's kind of like a combination of all the work I had done up to that point. It was like taking the man on the street videos and taking my comedy and like taking all of that and putting it into like a documentary. So yeah, we made the doc and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to make. I mean, I learned a lot about making a, I mean, this is a full length thing. It was like 75 minutes or something. So this is like a
Yeah.
full length documentary. And I learned a lot about that process. I mean, I don't know if people realize like how much work it takes to put together a piece of film that long. I mean, editing is no joke, and if you ever meet an editor, like, they're doing the real work
Yeah.
because
Give them a big forehead kiss. They earned it.
it's so much work of like lining up audio and like, I mean, it's a ton of work. And the only real regret I have about that thing is that, you know, it was me and one guy who filmed it. So I was there the entire time, and then he gave me the footage, and then I had me and another guy edited it. But editing when it's just two people takes so long. I
Hmm.
mean, it takes so many months and he had a full-time job. I have comedy. So it's like we were meeting up at night after our day
Ugh.
editing this thing. And so it took longer to get out. And I think we did definitely miss like a window of releasing it when it would have popped a little harder, because by the time we were releasing it, like, COVID was starting to be like very much on the back burner.
Hmm.
And if we had really like gotten it out quicker, I think it would have had a bigger impact. So I don't think we got as many views, but I still really stand by it. I think it was a good piece of work, and I think everybody who's watched it generally seems to have like a pretty positive response to it. But um it just, yeah, it takes a lot of work to make something like that, and I am proud of it. I think like it's nice. I think it would only be more interesting to watch in like 5 or 10 years, because then people will be
Right.
like, it's almost like a time capsule of like, oh, this is crazy that this was happening. Like, that summer of 2021 is like documented across the country, all these different towns, seeing what it was like, seeing what people were like. Um, so I think it almost will be more interesting to watch, especially seeing like what happens with COVID, in 5 years or 10 years, to be like, oh, crazy. Like, I'm glad this is somewhere.
I mean, even like a couple years after the fact, like
Right.
watch. Like I remember, I started watching the Bad Friends podcast.
Yeah.
Uh, I started watching it in like fall of 2020. So like COVID was in full effect,
Hmm.
and but they started doing episodes in like January, so like before COVID, or even I think a little earlier than that. So I
Yeah.
literally got to watch COVID happen and George Floyd happen
Right.
and like all of the shit that went down in 2020 through this podcast, and it was
Yeah.
like wild to watch these people react. How, like, looking back, it was just, yeah, I totally agree with you. It is interesting to see what this tumultuous time, like the thoughts people have had, and everything like that.
Totally. Yeah. And also, like, just as a rule for, like, it seems like this new way of comedy and entertainment is like I mean, it's like it's another like double edged sword because in one way it's like I don't want to be like a slave to like this algorithm. Like I don't want my what I do to be like defined or dictated by like this little thing. But on the other hand, it's like the more work you put out, you never know what opportunities you'll get. And so
Hmm.
like the more stuff, and again, it should be quality. It shouldn't just be garbage. But like if you stand by your work and you make something that you think is quality and you put it out, like you never really know where it'll lead. Like even if it is just a joke that you put on Instagram, like I put one on a few weeks ago and like it probably gained me like 1,000 followers, just
Damn.
because like, which isn't a lot. Like I still only have like 3,200 followers. Like I'm not super like big, but it's like I went from like 20 whatever to 30, and like that's like it's just because it was out there. Like it's and people found the man on the street videos or people find the documentary or the podcast. So it's like the more quality stuff you can put out, the better you're going to be. Even if it's, I mean, I put that special out on YouTube and then some company picked it up and put it on Tubi. Like, who knows how many extra views I got off fucking Tubi? Who cares? But it's just like,
Right.
it's another way that maybe one extra person could find you, Like, that's all you really have to think about in those terms of like, maybe one person could find this thing and then they would become a fan and then find, because everything you want eventually is just you want them to come to see you live.
Oh yeah,
That's
that's
like
it.
what it is. Like, I mean, all this internet shit is like, if I was just famous and like I just didn't need this, I would fucking delete this shit in a heartbeat. Like, I would never do this. I would never
Yeah.
do a single thing. I would never post on Instagram or Twitter or TikTok. I would just be like, if I was just big enough and my name carried, it's like, oh, I'm performing here and just people will come. Like, that would be great. But until you get to that, you kind of need to use these tools to like find those people.
You got to play the game.
You have
Like
to
you
play the
can't just
game.
be the Sebastian Maniscalco's. I don't even
No.
think he has an Instagram.
Or like Dave Chappelle. Like Dave Chappelle doesn't need to ever post a single thing on the internet ever again. And he should just say, I'm going to do Madison Square Garden and he'll do Madison Square Garden. But like most of
Right.
us are not at that level. And most of us honestly will never be at that level. Like we'll probably always have to do this in some way or another. But I don't know. You just have to make it what you want it. You can't make it like if you don't want to post 2 clips a week, then don't post 2 clips. If you want to post 2 clips, put like I don't know. I go back and forth on it all the time,
Oh
and
yeah.
like it's definitely something I think about a lot. But what are you gonna do? Like this is the world we live in right now.
Yeah, and it is nobody's putting a gun to our head to do this shit.
No, not
Like
at all. It's a
we do it
total
because we love
choice.
it.
Yeah, it's a total choice. I mean, I've like built my entire life around it at this point. So this is what I clearly want to be doing. I moved to a different town just so I could do this. So this is it, you know?
Oh yeah, and it's like I think people lose sight of why they originally got into stand up.
Right.
Like it's not for the internet. It's not for the the this and the that. It's so we can tell shit jokes to people on stage and make them laugh. Like that's all it is.
Yeah, get the same joy out of posting a clip. The likes that you get from an app are not the same you get from real laughs and by real people in a real room. So that'll never change, I don't think.
God no, and it translates to bigger audiences, but it's not the same.
It's definitely not the same, yeah. People don't get that too. People who just watch clips online have no real clue of what it actually feels like to be in a room watching someone do stand up live. It's just
Even
it's
a
not a
special.
yeah, oh, the specials. I hate specials, by the way. I mean, I have one obviously, so whatever,
Yeah,
but like I truly think that like albums are the best way to deliver comedy to people who are not in the room because album almost tricks your brain into thinking that you're in the audience versus a
yeah,
special is like you are watching screen, you're watching through a screen a group of people watching a performer. Like
yeah,
it is not the way to consume comedy, and I think a lot of specials now are done so poorly and they're so rushed and they're so
dude.
big. I mean, these comics, like, for some reason, even if they're a theater act, they decide that they have to record their special to theater, even though it would do much better at a club. I mean, I don't get it. I don't understand it. I mean, I know the money is there. You would rather just get the money for the theater show that night, but if they took one night off the theater and they just did clubs for a week and filmed a special, they would all have better specials. But they just want to do it like a one night thing. They do two shows at a 15,000 person arena, and then it's just like, or
Yeah,
whatever,
it's
5,000 person, and it's just doesn't translate.
yeah, and they're like, there's a special who came out. Nobody fucking listened to this podcast, dude. Tim Dillon's special. The content wasn't bad, but like the audio quality sucked.
Oh shit, I didn't even watch it. It was not good.
It was on Netflix. Yeah, I couldn't watch it after the first couple of minutes. Like the audio quality, and like the video is fine, but the audio is horrible. And it's like this is really like the thing that got put out for this like big time comic who's got like I mean all of these fans, and this is his
Right.
first big special after he's popped, and like the production value took away from the material. I was like,
Weird.
what in the fuck? Yeah. And then I just watched Burt Kreischer is filming his special in Omaha.
Oh yeah, I
So
saw that.
my buddy and I just went to it last night. And personally, I wouldn't, if I went to see a special taping again, I would do a late show or like, maybe like the third or fourth show or whatever. Because the first show is just like really buttoned up and that kind of thing. But like the microphones were turned way down. So like at the beginning of his set, somebody was like, turn it up. And they're like, it was like a whole thing.
Oh,
Uh,
weird.
yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, the focus on it because everybody's making them. It's like the word special, like it literally is like, it's not anymore.
No, no, not anymore. It really is just so ubiquitous. Everybody has one. And I mean, again, it's just because it's like a thing that you can just throw up on YouTube for free. And it's the good ones, obviously, like people like, like some of the guys have put out, they do have millions of views and it's really helped them. But
Hmm.
I just see like every day, like I'm recording a special and like you're kind of like, all right, like I don't know, man. Like I've seen your shit. I don't know. Are you really have an hour of like amazing shit? Like I don't know. I guess
Yeah.
to me, it's like why not wait until a few years, like hone that and make it great. Why? Like I think everybody just wants to say they have one,
Oh
but
yeah.
whatever,
And it's
who
like
am
it's an
I?
added thing in your merch store. Like, oh, I have,
Yeah.
I'm a like there's a comic in Omaha who made his first album. He was like 7 years in, and the guy's hilarious. And it was like,
Hmm.
okay, 7 years in makes total sense. But then like, yeah, 2, 3 years in,
Yeah.
people are putting out, here's my 45 minutes, and it's like,
Right.
dude, you have 15 minutes. Like, what are we
Yeah.
doing?
Right. Yeah. It's strange, but I think yeah, everybody just wants shit to throw on the internet quickly, and so that's what's happening.
So I guess like now, like you just moved to New York. What are the kind of like the first few months? What are the things that you're trying to do and look for? Because like moving to a new scene is tough, and then making that new scene New York is like, I mean, so
Yeah.
much bigger.
Yeah. I mean, so you go to New York because if you want to do strictly stand up, this is where to be. It's the best
Mhm.
comedy, the most stage time. It's the place you're going to get better. So I don't regret moving to New York. It is difficult to swallow the pill of like, when I was on the road, I was doing shows almost every night. I just before I moved to New York, I did back to back weekends of headlining clubs. And
Nice.
then I move here and I'm doing 3 minutes a night at these
Right.
empty open mics. So it's like that is tough. Like I've been here for under 2 weeks and I do like miss stand up. Like I miss getting to do a lot of stand up because
Mhm.
basically what you do here is like these open mics, you can do them if you want, but like a lot of my friends who have been here in New York, like they're like, I can't remember the last open mic I've done. Like they don't do them here
Interesting.
because to them it's like, hey, they're getting booked on shows, but if they're not on a show, like it's almost more valuable for them to watch a show because that's like the networking that you need. Like, oh,
Hmm.
it's all like it's all like being at places so eventually they book you
Yeah.
versus like a small scene. It's just being funny and like, oh, this guy goes to these mics and we see him and he's getting better, we'll put him on our local show. But here it's like there's a million and one comics, a lot of them who have the best credits you can hope for, like they've been on Netflix or late night or Comedy Central or whatever, or
Hmm.
a huge podcast. So like you're competing with them to get any stage time, first of all. And then if you if like you are at the bookable level where you're like, oh yeah, this guy's funny enough to book, like there's just a bunch of other versions of you. Like there's a bunch of other funny white guy Jews in fucking New
Yeah.
York. Like he like
Yeah.
so it's like you just have to be around. Like it's like they have to know who you are. They have to see, oh, he comes to our show. Like let's get him a spot. Or like a lot of people go to shows because people are doing multiple spots a night in New York, like they might miss a train or a train might run late or their spot gets bumped. So they're like, I
Hmm.
can't make that show. So then it's like, hey, you're here. Can you do the spot? So it's a lot of that. And it's very weird because I will go to my thing here is I go to one open mic a day I have to get on stage every day. You know,
Hmm.
it's just like what I want to do. But then I usually go watch at least one. I always watch one, if not two shows a night. So
Damn.
I'm watching like multiple hours of comedy from host to headliner. I never did that in Portland. I never needed to go to a show in Portland to watch because I would just be on that show next week. Like there was no like incentive for me to just be like, "Oh,
Right.
well, I'll go watch that show." Like it just was not necessary because everybody knew who you were in Portland because it's a small scene. But here it's like you gotta show up. You gotta shake the hands. You gotta fucking say, "Hey, I'm new to town," or whatever. You have to do that whole
Hmm.
thing, and that has been a weird thing because it's like I'm not used to that, and I want to be doing longer sets. I don't want to just be doing 3 minutes a night. I just like not good enough. So I'm quickly realizing like I am going to need to keep doing some road stuff just to keep me happy comedically.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm looking at, I was actually, before got on together, I was looking at like, all right, I'm like trying to set up like a weekend in like Baltimore, like places I can easily access from New York where I don't have to
Hmm.
like even fly, like you could take a bus. But yeah, I can't just be doing this 3 minutes a day shit. Like, it's just not going to work for me. So,
Well, and that's why
uh,
it seems like
yeah.
so tough to come up in New York because, like, in other scenes, like, you can get, 5, 7. Like, there used to be an open mic in Omaha. They did 10 minutes and it was
Oof.
empty. I mean, it was an open mic,
Yeah.
but, like, it was
It's got to
like
be
you
pretty
could do,
rough.
oh, you have no
Just
idea.
10. I mean, there used to be one in Portland that would give people 8, and it was like, we don't have
God.
8. Why are we lying to ourselves? But
Yeah, 8 and
whatever,
of open mic shit too. Like, it was like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but that's that's besides the
Yeah.
point. But yeah, you get this stage time in other scenes, and there's less people, so it's easier to find like good mentors and
Right.
learn from people. But then like when you're in New York, it's almost like testing your networking capabilities over everything else, from what I've been hearing from other people as well.
Yeah. It's definitely but it's also like you'll, you'll never have to do this again anywhere, though, was the thing. Like,
Yeah.
that, like, fucking, in some places, like New York is almost like a credit unto itself at this point. Like, oh, you're a New York
Right.
comic? Like, oh, you must be good, and like, and everybody basically told me like just take the first year is gonna suck, so
Hmm.
just be okay with that. But after that, you'll start getting something. So I'm okay. Like I've kind of just like taken that. Like I understand. Like all right, the first year is gonna be rough. It is what it is. But you also come here and you do see comics who are average. I mean,
Yeah.
you see comics on shows who are just okay. They're not great. They're not bad. They're just average. And it's like, so not everybody here is a killer. Not everybody here is just murdering. They're just figuring it out too. So, you know, that's not like, it's less intimidating the longer you're here. You're just like, oh, these are just comics doing their thing.
Yeah, it has this stigma, and it's like, okay, that stigma applies to like maybe 40 comics out of
Yeah.
like 8,000.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Like some guys, you're like, if you had to follow them, you'd be like, fuck, I'm doomed. But a lot of them, it's just
Yeah.
like, I've been around the block enough where I'm just like, all right, I can handle this. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, and like cuz
And
you can
honestly, you want to follow the good ones because you'll get better that way. Like you want to
yeah.
get put in your place. Like that's why you come here. You don't want to just stick around a small scene and be like, oh, I'm the best, or I know, like, oh, my buddy's funny and following him. But like you followed him a million times. Like you want to follow guys who are like killers, and then it's like makes you be like, all right, I got to get to that level.
Yeah, people are like, "Oh, I got to follow this person." And it's like Yeah, great. Like I would much rather follow somebody who kills than somebody who just sucks all the air out of the room.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Comics are so fucking just
Yeah,
need to
well,
be
everybody's just,
hospitalized.
yeah, it's a weird thing.
Well, and like because you can do the road, you're not just stuck in New York dealing with that
Right.
shit. So if you need to take some time off and travel, like you
Yeah.
have that
And
ability, and somebody who started in New York doesn't.
totally, totally. Yeah. That's the game. That is the game.
Dude, that's awesome, man. I'm really happy for you. And like, I think you're gonna, yeah, the first year I've heard, you know, it's a lot, but like I have no doubt that after that year and after a few years, you're gonna be, the cream rises to the top, and I think you're as creamy as it gets. So,
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, dude, if you ever come out here, let me know. And if I ever so you have a show in Kansas, maybe I'll come to Kansas at some point.
dude, if you're in like the Midwest, or if you're doing a run of whatever through the Midwest, come down, hit me up. And there's also like a really good community of the people who book shows in the Kansas City scene. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And like you also know a bunch of comics in the area. So yeah, come down to KC and have some barbecue and do some jokes. It'll be fun.
Hell yeah, dude. I'd love to.
Um, lastly, where can people find your stuff?
Social media at the comedian Jake on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. My YouTube is just Jake Silberman. I do have a weekly podcast that comes out every Friday called The Jake Silberman Show. So check that out. And yeah, like if you're ever in New York and you're looking for comedy, yeah, just check my social media if I'm doing shows or not. And if I'm on the road, I'll post all my dates at my website, which is thecomedianjake.com.
And you guys can find me at Spencer_Gordman on Instagram and TikTok, or just my name, Spencer Gordman, on Facebook. But more importantly, follow the podcast. It's called On Their Way Up on Instagram and Twitter. And subscribe wherever you're listening. And again, if you'd rather watch instead of listen, you can watch it on Spotify and on the YouTube page. Again, that's On Their Way Up.
And yeah, man, good to see you again. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll fill in my plugs afterwards. But yeah, dude, this was a blast. Great to talk to you again. Seriously, best of luck going forward. And yeah, everybody, thank you for listening to the podcast. Follow Jake, look up his shit, and have a good day, all.